Welcome back to the Amateur Bowl podcast. This is I think it's like one of the first off-season editions of the podcast. Might have been the second or the first. Doesn't really matter. We're finally back. We're ready to talk uh, some 2021 NFL season. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be really great. The off season's been really eventful. A lot of things have gone on, and now
Yeah.
we've kind of come to the tail end of it, where there are a few moves here and there, a few free agents
Yeah.
that have yet to be signed, a few
hmm
trades that could be happening. But these are the rosters essentially that we're going to
Yeah.
be dealing with.
Like Max said, this is basically there's not going to be any like too many roster like changing moves within the next couple of days, like barring any surprises. But yeah, this is kind of what we're working with.
Yeah, agreed. And jumping off of that, what we decided to do is we decided to do what pretty much every analyst, every YouTuber, every person that is doing football content has done, and basically ranked the teams in
hmm
the league at
Yep.
this moment. We have jumped on the bandwagon. We have done that. We've kind of did it the same way we did last year, in that we both made a list and we kind of averaged it out.
hmm
So let's bring it up on the screen and let's take it from here.
Yep.
So as you can see, we had a lot of them are very much the same. Like we knew
Yeah.
coming in we were going to have the top and the bottom pretty much the exact same,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we did.
Yeah.
A
Yep.
lot in the middle is really the contentious part, but I
Yeah.
mean, you know just as well as I did that there are a lot of difficulties ranking the middle, right?
Yeah, like I think that's a difficulty part, but like the difficult part, because you have your juggernauts, and then you have your teams that absolutely suck, and I think the most difficult part is finding out kind of navigating through the middle, like who like they're not super bad, but they're not also not great, so you kind of have to work your way through the middle, which I didn't find super difficult, but I think just if you were to ask 10 people, there's a good chance that nine out of 10 people have different lists, so
Yeah,
it is what it is.
agreed,
It happens, so.
agreed.
Mhm.
Can you tell me just very quickly how you made your list?
Okay, so like I mentioned before, basically, when we were exchanging messages before we recorded, I basically did it so that I basically split up into like elite Super Bowl contenders and teams that are going to be tanking, or not, maybe not tanking, but like bottom feeders that are going to be like in the top end of the draft lottery coming. Or so I guess there's no lottery in football, but um, like who's going to be in the top like 5 to 10 draft, like 1 to 5 draft picks, because I think that that's relatively easy. So obviously, like when you have your contenders, you have your Chiefs, your Bucks, your whoever you think about in that sense. And I think just doing that really makes it a lot easier because you're basically limiting how much of the in the middle meat there is, if that makes sense. But yeah, I basically just did it into like 3 different sections: contenders, uh, like top 10, top 5, 10 draft picks, and then just the middle, like the teams that are either going to be contending for the playoffs or going to be like towards the end of the middle round of the first round of the draft.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty standard way of doing it.
Yeah.
I had an easy time ranking the top 12, and I had
Yep.
an easy time ranking the bottom 10. It
hmm
was just that middle group of around 13 teams that I couldn't do it. So the way
hmm
I did it was I actually made a little algorithm,
hmm
and I split each of those 13 teams up into 7 categories: quarterback, running, or no, sorry, rushing, passing,
Yep.
receiving, offensive line,
Yep.
front seven, defensive backs, and coaching.
Yep.
And I weighted I weighted quarterback and coaching a little bit more, and I weighted the front seven a little bit more.
Which is fair. Okay.
Yeah, that's just kind of how I value the
hmm
teams. And so
Yeah.
I basically just put down, team by team, how
Right.
how that algorithm went based
Right.
on how I ranked each of those teams.
Right.
So that's what you see on my side.
Sure.
And yeah, it may seem a little funky. There are some teams that are really high, some teams are really low. That's just how the
Yeah.
numbers worked out.
Yeah, and that's fair. I guess for me, like when you break that down, mine was a little bit less thorough. I basically kind of did um, kind of took into account all the moves that have been made so far in the off season and kind of did like a little like almost just like a very broad picture of like how do I feel about this team in general? Because I think for a lot of teams, you can kind of like how do I feel about like the Kansas City Chiefs, for example? Like you kind of have a like you already have an idea of kind of what to expect going forward or going into the season. That's kind of how I did it instead of actually like kind of like breaking out individual position, which again is fine. It's just not it's just not really how I did it. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think
Yeah.
that my approach does to a certain extent. I tried as hard as I could to make sure that to recognize that the team as a whole
Hmm.
isn't really is the sum of its parts, but it's not
Yep.
as equal, and that's why I kind of weighted coaching really
Hmm.
high, and I weighted the quarterback really high because they are essentially the drill sergeants, the ones making
Oh
sure
yeah.
everything goes the way they go on the offensive defensive sides. That was just my thing.
Mhm.
Why don't we get into the actual rankings then, shall we?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
we kind of
Yes.
we had different approaches, and I think
We
that
did.
really showed.
Yep.
So let's start with the top, which is pretty much the same.
Hmm.
Uh, Bucks at 1, Chiefs at 2.
Yep.
What makes the Chiefs worse than the Bucks to you?
I think the big thing to me is like even on paper you can argue that like the Chiefs aren't better than so if you look at the two teams on paper you could argue the Chiefs are better than the Buccaneers. The big thing that sticks out to me is um, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers basically steamrolled the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and one team brought majority of their pieces back, and one brought the whole team back. The other team basically stood pat, lost some players, or did a very mediocre job of replacing kind of some of the pieces they lost. Um, I thought the Bucks did an absolutely fantastic job on paper, like at least right now on paper, of bringing back all those same players. The Kansas City Chiefs, to me, may have taken a bit of a small step back, just given some of the pieces that they lost on defense, some of the pieces they lost on their offensive line. But they did bring in a lot of good pieces on their offensive line. I will bring in that. But like in terms of like if you were to play out a scenario where the Chiefs and the Buccaneers were to play each other again in the Super Bowl this year, I just don't really see any scenario where the Chiefs are in any better position to take down uh, Tom Brady, the rest of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mhm. Just for the rest of this video, we made these rankings on the assumption that everybody stays healthy.
Yes, that too.
We
Yes,
can't
sorry.
predict
Yes, that.
we
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
predict
yeah.
injuries. No, that's don't apologize. Obviously you were speaking on that assumption,
Mhm.
and I'm sure everybody thought that way. It just
Yep.
needed to be said.
Okay.
Uh, I think you're absolutely right that the Buccaneers are just they're such a good roster. It's
Oh yeah.
insane.
Oh yeah.
They're absolutely stacked from head to toe. It's crazy when Tom Brady is kind of like your weak link as
I
as like a
know.
player, you know?
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Like
Like don't get me wrong, he has a really big hand in the leadership on that team, but as far as the playing goes, the quarterback is the roughest position on that roster.
yep.
And just every that just goes to show how good everything else is, really.
Oh yeah.
And the Kansas City Chiefs, they're so strapped for cash, they just couldn't make their
Yeah.
defense any better.
Which and that's more of an indictment on the like sorry, it's not even an indictment on the Chiefs. It just goes to show how stacked the Bucks are. Like they have so many great pieces and so many great players that are in just beneficial salary positions. They can just afford to do more. Like if you look at the players on the Chiefs, like obviously Mahomes, Kelsey, they have a lot of players that are making big dollars on that team. So like you mentioned, they just weren't in a financial position to be able to do much, which it's not really their fault. They're just paying their best players, which you have to do in sports. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And I'm sure everybody and their mother have heard enough about the Chiefs and the Buccaneers over the last few
I'm
months.
sure
So
they have.
why don't
Yes,
we move to the bottom, where we
yes,
have the Detroit Lions, Houston Texans as the bottom two.
yeah.
Most people I've seen have had the Texans at the bottom, and I don't know
Interesting.
about you,
Yeah,
but like I can't in my right mind put a team with Deshaun Watson on it at 32. And let's be honest, he's going
yeah,
to play this year. Like no
yeah,
matter what happens, there have been way worse things that
yeah,
players have done in the NFL and have been able to play.
yeah,
Deshaun Watson is going to play a majority of the
yeah.
season. And if he dresses for the Houston Texans, that offense is actually not terrible and it
Mhm.
puts them over the Lions for me.
I'll be honest, I actually completely forgot about Deshaun Watson. To me, I think the Houston Texans, Detroit Lions, you could either put them 31 or 32. Does it like the point the sorry if we're assuming Deshaun Watson is going to play this season, you're 100% right about putting the Houston Texans over the Detroit Lions just in the sense like he's a franchise quarterback whether you like it or not. He's a franchise quarterback, and I don't think any team with that type of player can be dead last in the league. But I guess for me, like you're right. There's been a lot of worse stuff that's happened in the NFL. Um, I guess I'm curious. Like, do they suspend him for a couple games? Does he even play at all? Like, does he sit? Like, the other possibility, like, does this guy sit out for the entire season and be like, I'm not playing until you trade me? That's the other possibility, which again, we can argue how likely that is or not. I think the thing that sticks out for me though is like the Detroit Lions, now that they have like Jared Goff, there's like the Detroit Lions basically have nothing going on for them now. Absolutely nothing. Matt Stafford's gone, Kenny Galladay's gone. They are in full rebuild mode, and just the whole vibe around that team right now seems even worse than the Texans, and I didn't even think that's even possible. So again, I don't really think you're definitely not wrong in the points that you made. I just think for me personally, given the current circumstance of the Houston Texans and Deshaun Watson, it makes the Texans and the Lions a bit interchangeable for 31 and 32. I just think they're both in horrible positions right now, and it's going to be years and years before they actually get back to a contending stage.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about Deshaun Watson sitting out until he gets traded, he has no leverage anymore. He really
Yeah,
does.
that's fair.
He
And
can't.
that's
He can't really do that
no, and
anymore.
that's fair. And again, like the thing about these athletes though, is we have to keep in mind that like they don't necessarily act out of what may be in the best interest for that. Sorry, they don't really think through of whether they have leverage or not. Sometimes they just do it for just because they don't want to play there anymore. And frankly, I wouldn't blame him if he sat out until they traded him because like hell, look at the Texans now. They're absolutely brutal. But anyways, it'll be interesting to see how the Deshaun Watson saga plays out. But I don't think it's ending anytime soon though.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that the Texans did make some good moves. They did kind of
Yep.
recognize that no one wanted to come. No
Yeah.
one wants to go to Houston right now.
Yeah.
So they kind of they made some good moves.
Yep.
They brought in Shaq Mason from the Patriots. Was it Shaq Mason or Marcus Cannon? It was one of those two, but they brought in some offensive line help, which was a
Yep.
big problem for them in the past.
Hmm.
They brought in Philip Lindsay, who's definitely an upgrade at running back, and they
Well,
brought in Shaq Lawson from the Dolphins, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it makes sense for their team. And they did a good job of getting like mid to low level free agents and not spending too much in the cap.
yep.
I think they did a really good job there. It only helps a little bit. They still have to play the Colts and the Titans twice a year. It's not going to help them at all.
Yeah.
And the Detroit Lions didn't really do much
Yeah.
besides drafting Penei Sewell 7th overall, which was a great move. They really didn't do much to help themselves out. And
Yep.
you can tell their team, especially on the defense, just doesn't look like teams of the past few years.
Yep. And that's fair.
But they even
Yep.
look worse.
Yep. It really just seems like they're fully embracing the like we are completely tearing it all down, rebuilding, which I think is 100% fair, and that's the way they need to go. Penei Sewell was obviously a really nice move in the draft, a really nice player. There's going to be something really nice going forward. DeAndre Swift is obviously a nice piece there, but yeah, like other than that, there's not a lot going down in Detroit right now, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Let's go to just a little bit higher up.
Hmm.
We kind of have similar ideas on, the Jets
Yeah.
and the Eagles and the Bears.
Right.
What makes you a little higher on the Falcons?
Yeah, so as you can see, I had the Falcons at 24. Max had them at 30. And really, the main reason I have them a bit higher than everyone else is just because I still have a bit of faith in Matt Ryan. Um, he is by no means a scrub or anything like that. He's still like a pretty serviceable quarterback. Like if you look at his stats last year, I think he was still like top 10 in passing yard, which is pretty remarkable. And I guess the thing is, like I look at the Falcons, and obviously the big subtraction now is going to be Julio Jones is no longer with them. But if you look at how many games they didn't have him last year, it's really not that big of a drop off. I mean, obviously they lost some other pieces, but the fact they still have Calvin Ridley, who's still really young, and Matt Ryan still. I don't I have difficulty putting them in the same I guess area as like the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Texans, the Lions. Now granted I didn't put them that much higher than them, but I thought that Matty Ice and Calvin Ridley deserved a little bit more respect than being placed all the way down there.
Yeah, that's fair. And you did say the thing about how Julio Jones didn't play a lot
Yeah,
of the year last year, so I
yeah,
guess it wouldn't make much of a difference. Well, they went 4-12 last year. They had
right,
a terrible year, and
right,
their defense, they didn't make their defense any better.
right.
Like, yeah,
Okay.
Grady Jarrett's there. Yeah, Deion Jones is there.
Yeah.
Maybe AJ Terrell takes a step up, but that defense
Hmm.
is still probably one of the worst in the league. And you've just taken out one of your biggest pieces on offense, which
Right.
was really what was keeping you going.
Yeah.
I think this team, you can tell they're rebuilding now, and that was
Yeah.
just
No, for sure.
it was
I don't. Yep.
brutal.
Yep. That's a fair take. I don't know, like whenever you have a guy like Matt Ryan, like again, I know they're 4-12 and everything, but I don't know. I guess I have a little bit of love for Matt Ryan after all. After I traded him last year in my fantasy pool. So,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah, fair enough. And Matt
Yeah.
Ryan's still going to be a good quarterback. He's still a
Oh, for
low end
sure.
top 10 quarterback
Oh
in the
yeah.
league. It's just how much can he really do?
Yep.
That's the question.
I
Depends on Arthur Smith as well. Who
yeah.
knows? Okay. Anyways, uh, there are a few teams in the middle here that you kind of had a lot higher than
Sure.
me. You had the Dallas Cowboys a lot higher than I did. You have the
Yep.
Arizona Cardinals a lot higher than I did. You have the Steelers considerably higher than I did, which is predictable.
Right.
And the Dolphins too. Are any of those teams ones you want to speak to?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll quickly just go through the team that you mentioned. Okay. So the Cowboys. Um, the reason there's only one reason why I put them this high, and that is the offense. You're not putting them this high because of the defense. I still think if you look at that, like the one thing people didn't really talk about last season with the Dallas Cowboys is how just torn apart they were by injury. Um, their offensive line was completely picked apart. You can like I just think you have Ezekiel Elliott. You have arguably one of the deepest receiving cores in Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. That you're getting Dak Prescott back. I just think if you look at their offense on paper, like it's probably one of the most dynamic and deep offenses in the entire NFL. And the only thing that's really holding this team back is their defense. Because we were like last year, they were like a historically bad defense, which obviously didn't get much better considering it looks like Jerry Jones liked to go to the bargain bin in the offseason for their defense. But when you look at their offense, I just have a trouble putting them anywhere in like below the halfway mark of the league because I just think they're that dynamic on offense.
Mhm.
Um, the Miami Dolphins again. So this is a bit of the opposite actually. I am very, very high on the Miami Dolphins defense. The defensive line is absolutely absurd. The middle, like their really good linebacker core. Their secondary is really good. If Tua can take a jump this year, like their offense last year already wasn't that great, but if Tua can develop a bit, help take a bit of a step as a starting quarterback, I think the Dolphins have a lot to give this year. I really do. Um, so I guess I'll give you a little I guess I'll let you speak on the two that I spoke on right there.
Mhm. All right. To the Cowboys, I love their offense. It looks
Yep.
really cool. Just the math, the algorithm that I had,
Hmm.
it saw how high I ranked Dak Prescott,
Hmm.
and it compare that with how low I ranked their front seven and their head coach. I think
Yep.
Mike McCarthy is going to get fired soon.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I just the metrics didn't really support them to be
Okay.
that high.
That's
So that
fair.
was just that. I do like the Cowboys. I think they'll be a fun team to watch. Even when Dak was healthy last year, they were scoring so many points. He
Yep.
was doing so damn well.
Hmm.
So that'll be interesting to see if Ezekiel Elliott kind of makes up for a bad year last year,
Yep.
and if Blake Jarwin can stay healthy, and that if that offensive line can stay healthy. I think that's
Yep.
really what it comes down to.
Yep.
But yeah, the Cowboys will be an interesting team.
Mhm.
And the other team you spoke to was the Miami Dolphins, and I agree,
Correct.
their defense is really good. I think the metrics just didn't support Tua. I didn't have Tua ranked that high. That's
Okay,
just it.
that's fair.
Um, I improved their rushing score because of Tua.
Yep.
I had him kind of factored into the rushing.
Hmm.
Just as far as just pure passing goes, I don't think he has it.
Okay.
And yeah, he'll probably take a jump up, but
Yeah.
I don't know. My
And that,
faith isn't that high.
yeah, and also my projection of the Dolphins is also like it's dependent on Tua taking a jump. I'm not like if Tua doesn't have it, I think the Dolphins are in trouble. Just given that um defense can obviously win you games, but if you don't have like at least a somewhat reliable quarterback, you're in trouble. And I just think they don't really have a lot of the other complementary pieces around Tua on that offense to really make them, I guess, like an elite team. If they had a couple of nicer pieces, I would probably have them ranked a lot higher because like that's just how much I really believe in that defense and in their head coach. But um, it is what it is. Like really it's not really that super deep or anything like that. And I guess the two other ones that we had differences on were the Steelers and the Cardinals. Um, so I guess I'll start with the Steelers. Um, I still really like that defense. Like I know as a Ravens fan, you hate the Steelers, which is obviously fine. It's a little difficult for you to be non-biased, but here's what I'll say about the Steelers. The fact that they have Ben Roethlisberger as their starting quarterback is extremely concerning. They're not winning anything with Ben Roethlisberger as their quarterback. Bud Dupree obviously left. That sucks, but I still really believe in that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Probably that defense is still probably in the top five, top 10 in the league. Um, but I guess for me that this projection is really coming off of that defense. Najee Harris, I think will be at least a bit of an upgrade over James Conner, or if not an upgrade, at least like they'll stand pat from where they were last year. I didn't like James Conner at all last year, and they still have like Juju. They still got Deontay Johnson, and they still got Chase Claypool is gonna have another year under his belt. Like it's not a great offense, but I think Ben Roethlisberger has a nice, I guess, a nice little group of surrounding pieces around him. But like to me, it's mostly about the defense and like almost nothing in regard to the offense.
Yep, agreed. The metric did support the fact that I had Mike Tomlin as the number one coach out of those
And that's
13
the thing, right?
coaches.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin's a phenomenal coach as well. Sorry, go ahead. I
Yeah.
didn't cut you off.
And the front seven, I had them ranked number one as well, over the
Yep.
Bears,
Yep.
over the Vikings, over the Broncos,
Mm.
like over Washington. They just, you can't deny how great they are. You're absolutely right about that.
Yep.
I just, their offense is so anemic, and they took so many steps back in the offseason, and they have to play the Ravens and the Browns twice this year. And the Bengals are not going to be an easy team to beat. I just don't see
Mhm.
it with the Steelers. That's just, they have a first place schedule as well. They have to play the Chiefs. They have to
Right.
play the
Yep.
Bills. Like their schedule is really rough.
I
And I mean,
forgot they won
obviously
their
that doesn't really
division.
factor into it that
Yeah.
much, but I look at the Steelers, I look at how their offensive line went from one of the best to one of the worst
Yep.
throughout the offseason. They really didn't do anything to it. You draft a running back in the first round, great if you have an offensive line and a quarterback, but
Mhm.
you have neither of those things.
Right.
So I don't know. I look at the Steelers and I think I'm actually quite happy because they're really making their team worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last one you mentioned, the Arizona Cardinals, I'll quickly touch on. Uh, Again, like the Miami Dolphins that we were talking about. This is basically completely dependent on Kyler Murray making another big jump. Again, I recognize that the Arizona Cardinals probably they made some moves, like they made like the Rodney Hudson move was a nice move. J.J. Watt was a nice little piece, although he's no longer the player that he used to be, or at least he's no longer in his prime. But like I still think that's a really nice piece to add there. They still have D Hop, they still have Christian Kirk. I still Kenyon Drake. Eh, they lost Kenyon Drake. I don't really see that being a major loss. Um, I don't know. Like I guess for me, the Arizona Cardinals somehow almost made the playoffs last year. I didn't really see, like in terms of the things they did in the offseason. I didn't really think they did much to get much worse, but I also don't really see them. I also didn't think they got much better. So I think this is about where I had them ranked last year. So I'm just basically projecting that Kyler Murray might take another step with D Hop, and then we'll see. But I think the Rodney Hudson move definitely helps him out a bit, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did make their team better a little bit
Yeah. Hmm.
in the offseason. They made some good moves. Drafting Rondale Moore in the second round definitely helped.
Yep.
Um, but I think the thing was in the algorithm in the rankings.
Yep.
When I took running backs and tight ends into account for the receiving, which pushed DeAndre Hopkins and that core down a little bit because
Right.
I had to put teams like the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey factoring in
Right.
higher. I
Right.
needed to put in the Giants with Saquon Barkley, needed to put that higher.
Right.
That was just kind of how it played out. And
Sure.
as far as just the actual passing goes, I had to rank Kyler Murray below guys like Herbert and Burrow because as a pure passer, I just feel like those.
Right.
So that was kind of it was kind of tough. They just had a lot of things in the algorithm that didn't really work in their favor. Also with front seven, I didn't really know where to put Isaiah Simmons. I didn't know if he was a different
Yeah. Yeah.
and I didn't know if they were going to play him because they just didn't play him last year.
Right.
So I didn't really know what to do with the Arizona Cardinals, and that's kind of why they ended up this low. I'm also really I don't think Kyler Murray's overrated per se, but
Hmm.
I think some people infantilize him as this amazing quarterback, and I think
Hmm.
he's going to get there. He's just not there yet.
That's fair. Yep. I
And
agree with that. I agree
I
with that.
looked at the numbers. Justin
Hmm.
Herbert had a better season than him last year.
Yeah, and I don't
Open.
think it. I think any sane football fan would, or at least someone who understands the numbers. I don't think anyone would disagree with you.
Yeah.
I think like that's just how great Justin Herbert was last year. It's not really an indictment on Kyler Murray. It's just Justin Herbert was that great. Like,
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of funny to think because Kyler Murray made the Pro Bowl and people put Kyler Murray on this pedestal. I don't know.
mhm.
I don't really see it as much right now, and
I think,
that
yeah,
was just my thing there.
yeah. I think his time will come, but I think it sometimes it takes him a little bit longer, especially because if you take into account just how much shorter he is than like the average quarterback. But anyways,
Agreed. All right, now let's talk about some of the teams in the middle that you have or that I have a lot higher than you.
sure.
So we'll talk about the Denver Broncos, the Minnesota Vikings, the Washington Football Team, and the New York Giants.
Okay.
I guess I'll start with the Denver Broncos.
Yep.
The algorithm just loved everything they brought to the table.
Okay.
I think their front seven is still incredible.
Hmm.
With Von Miller coming back, Bradley Chubb there, just their pass rush is going to be incredible. Shelby Harris in the middle, incredible. Linebackers still solid with Alexander Johnson there. Their secondary is probably one of the best in the league coming into this year, bringing Kyle Fuller and bringing back Justin Simmons, uh, drafting Patrick Surtain. They really worked on their secondary, so it's going to be really tough to pass on them, especially with that pass rush being as good as it is. And the offense under Teddy Bridgewater is going to be good. Teddy Bridgewater brings a floor, and Drew Lock brings a ceiling. So I think they something could work there.
Hmm.
And drafting Javonte Williams really mitigated their only weakness on the team, which was their
Yeah.
running game. Because Melvin Gordon sucked last year.
Right.
They draft Javonte Williams in the second round, so I think this roster is one of the most ready to contend in the league. And yeah,
Yeah.
they probably should have drafted Justin Fields, but
Yep.
I don't know. Their roster's still really good as it is.
Yeah.
So the algorithm really
Yeah.
supported
Yeah.
everything that was there. Also, I ranked Vic Fangio relatively high as a head coach, so
Okay.
that helped too.
Yeah. To me, there's one reason why I put them this low, and his name is Teddy Bridgewater. Um, like to me, like again, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think all around, if you look at the pieces on this Denver Broncos team, it's probably one of the most ready to contend in the league. I'm just not sold on their quarterback situation. And again, Teddy Bridgewater could completely shut me up in week one and then go out, or like it's probably gonna take a couple more weeks to be completely sold on Teddy Bridgewater, for both being honest. But like, I just think there's so many question marks there. I mean, we've seen him do it before with like the Saints and the Vikings and like the Panthers last year, I guess. But like, I'm just not sold. Like, I'm not. I don't know why. I feel like I'm not sold on him yet. If he goes out and shows like he can be that guy for the Broncos, yeah, absolutely. I would probably move him up to closer where you are, around 13. But I just don't really see it at this moment in time. And I think if they were to draft Justin Fields, that really would have changed how I looked at the Broncos going forward. But to me, like if Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt or for whatever reason, because he does have a bit of a injury plagued past, and you have to go back to Drew Lock, I think that like they're screwed. Like because this is like it's basically the same thing as last year where they have a great roster, but their quarterback can't get it done.
Yeah, it's fair. Having to play the Chiefs and Chargers twice a year doesn't help them either.
And the
So
Raiders, those scary Raiders.
yeah, yeah, I feel for you Raiders fans out there. You're in a tough fucking division.
Mm,
Yeah. So I see where you're coming from there. There's
yeah.
definitely cause for concern in their quarterback situation, but yeah, I think it'll be fine. Like I said, Teddy
Yeah.
brings a floor. He brings a
Right.
floor, and for a team that's great otherwise, and a team that essentially won a Super Bowl with not so great quarterback play 5 years ago,
Yep.
I think it's possible.
Yep.
I'll speak very quickly on the Washington football team,
Sure.
just because their defense is young and they're incredible. Like
Mhm.
it's built really well. And
Mhm.
even some guys that came there for their first year, like Kendall Fuller, just had complete resurgences. They played really well. So I think the defense is ready. Ron Rivera is a great defensive coach. This is a great coach overall. I gave him a high ranking there. And the offense, I know this is a big if, but if Ryan Fitzpatrick can maintain form and actually no, or not and or if Taylor Heineke can play like he did against the Bucks in the playoffs in the wild card round, or if Kyle Allen can play the way he was in the middle of the season before that bad injury. They
I
have
don't know.
three. They have three quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You have three quarterbacks that can
Yep.
play relatively well, and you've got playmakers there with
Yep.
Curtis Samuel.
Terry.
What's his name?
Terry.
Terry. Yeah, I forgot his name for some reason.
Yeah.
And Antonio Gibson there.
Anto, yeah.
Got three playmakers and a pretty damn good line. I think the team is also their division is not that great. It's
awful.
better,
It's
sure, but it's not great.
It's,
So I think they're in really good shape.
yeah.
That's with the Washington football team, and I kind of cut that short so I could talk about a kind of similarly built team, the San Francisco 49ers, which I have it. You have it 9.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be, but I think Jimmy Garoppolo went fine. George Kittle's going to be back, and that core is pretty solid still with Brennan Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and I think they drafted a receiver. I'm not 100% sure on that. You know how their rushing is, and Trent Williams and Alex Mack are there on the offensive line. Like the offense is gonna work pretty well, and the defense one of the best in the league.
Right.
So I just don't see why they're not that high. I think the only thing that's concerning to me is that they have to play the Rams, Seahawks, and Cardinals twice.
Yeah.
Beat all three of them. Hell, they were beating up on the Rams last year, and the Rams were way better than them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my thinking there.
Okay. Washington football team. Don't disagree at all. The thing is, they have three quarterbacks or three serviceable quarterbacks. I don't disagree with any of the situations that you described, like if Ryan Fitzpatrick can maintain form or Taylor Heineke. Exactly. The only thing is, even for those three, that's a huge if. Ryan Fitzpatrick is getting older. Taylor Heineke, again, I actually believe in Heineke. Do I think he can be as good as the Bucks? Maybe, but like the fact that you're basically relying on that is a huge if. And Kyle Allen, like, God, I don't wish bad on him or anything. I'm not confident that he can go back to playing back at that level after that extremely gruesome injury. Like that's like borderline. Like it's not quite as bad as Alex Smith's, but like that's pretty borderline, like just as bad. But like the defense is young and hungry. They definitely have playmakers, but like especially when two of those playmakers are like receivers, and now again Curtis Samuel can rush the ball, but just the whole if at quarterback is such a big red flag for me that I had difficulty putting him near the top. Now that being said, I guess like, and again, I think I had them around this rank last year, and they had Alex Smith as their quarterback. I think I said the same thing. Who was the other quarterback? No, it was Kyle Allen as well. Yeah. Sorry. I just outside of their quarterback situation, like I just don't really see a huge improvement, if that makes sense. They're definitely a solid team. They proved that last year. I just don't like the quarterback situation at all.
Yeah, it's fair.
And then I guess when you're talking about the Niners and the Rams, so me and you actually have the Niners and the Rams flipped. You have them at 3, and I have them at 9, and you have anyways. Basically, everything you said about the 49ers is basically how I feel about the Los Angeles Rams. And let me quickly break down what I like. The Rams last year had a championship caliber defense. They were unbelievable. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, absolute dogs on that defense. Like, and the thing is, the one question mark or the one problem they had on that team was, well, the offensive line, which you can say what you will about their offensive line, it's fine. But the glaring hole was their quarterback situation. Jared Goff was absolutely atrocious, and they went out and got arguably the best quarterback on the trade market in Matt Stafford. They still have Robert Woods. They still have Cooper Kupp. Cam Akers is going into his second year. I just have a I have a difficult time, look, because I guess the other thing with the Niners is they like, you're sold on Jimmy Garoppolo with the Niners. Me personally, I am not. I've seen what he brings to the table. Like it's serviceable, but I think just with the teams that are in this division, as we mentioned before, he's going to need to be more than serviceable. Their defense is still great. They're going to get Jimmy Bosa back and some of the other players on that defense, which is obviously great. But like Sherman's still not signed, so that secondary, in my opinion, got like maybe a little bit worse. But I just think when you look at the Rams, like in that division, I think that's if you're looking on paper, that's the scariest team in the division. If you take into account like if you like just the biggest like the big picture, I think they're probably the most complete team in their division. Yeah. So actually, let's talk about one more team because I noticed there's one here that I have very high, and you had a bit lower than me. The Indianapolis Colts are a team that I have ranked as the fourth best team, at least, yeah, the fourth best team in the NFL. You have them at 11. I'll quickly give you my reasoning, and then
Yeah.
you can kind of, I guess, rebuttal whatever I say. Okay.
Okay.
So last year, this was a team who was obviously led by Philip Rivers, the old man Rivers with his 9 children on his back. And I guess the main thing to me is this team on paper looks absolutely phenomenal, and I guess that's the main reason why I have them ranked so high. Um, they have Taylor coming back. They have T.Y. Hilton coming back, who obviously isn't a great receiving option, but hey, when you've invested as much money as they have, um, else around that roster. You can afford to bring back a guy like that for that little money. But like this is a top five defense last year, if not top three. I know they lost some pieces but they still have the big dogs on that defense. Julian Blackman in that secondary are still getting a bit better. Like this, there's just so much about this team to like, and I finally got a guy, Carson Wentz, who is being. I don't even think they're paying. I'm trying to. Are they? No, sorry. I don't know. I think Philadelphia is basically paying majority of his salary, so it's not even that much of there, like that much there, and they're pairing him with this head coach who was the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, who he really liked, and who was his coach when he was who was going to be the MVP before he got hurt. Like I again, this is a huge if because it basically just depends on whether or not Carson Wentz comes back to form, and it kind of just talks about how it kind of screams how confident I am that he is going to be able to get back to form. But like, it seems like the one big hole they had, they filled it with probably one of the best quarterbacks for their system and for their situation. I just think it's an absolute slam dunk for the Colts. They have an absolutely phenomenal run offense, and now they could potentially have even greater uh, passing offense once they get like Paris Campbell and who's the other one? The Michael
Michael
Pittman.
Pittman. Michael Pittman.
Pittman. Yeah, Michael Pittman. Once they get him back, I just think this Colts team looks borderline unstoppable.
Mm. Okay, I see where you're coming from, and looking back, maybe there were some teams that I had higher than the Colts that I maybe shouldn't have, like the Saints and the Packers. I don't know about that. I think the Colts are as good as they are. My thinking with the Colts and having them that low is that you look at the other teams I had in front of them, like the Packers, the Saints, the Rams, and the Titans.
Okay.
The things that they have, the Colts don't have, is star power.
Hmm.
Like I won't speak to the things you said because you're absolutely right. The closest thing they really have to a superstar is how you're projecting Carson Wentz
Yep.
and Darius Leonard and DeForest Buckner. Those are the closest things you have to elite players in this league.
Hmm.
And I, I don't know. I'm compare that to the elite players that these other guys have on their team. The
Sure.
the New Orleans Saints have Cameron Jordan. The Green Bay Packers have Aaron Rodgers and Jair
Hmm.
Alexander.
Sure.
The Tennessee Titans have Derrick Henry and AJ Brown and Kevin Byard.
Hmm.
It's tough to compare when you have
Yeah.
real game breakers, game changers on the team.
Hmm.
That's the reason the Colts lost to the Bills. That's it. They
Hmm.
just didn't have star power, and the Bills did. Like
Hmm.
that's the only reason a roster that deep and that stacked lost. So that's just my
Yeah.
thinking on the Indianapolis Colts. I can't really put them that high
Sure.
because they're missing that star.
I guess the one thing I will say is like the guy like there's one guy who I think could potentially take that jump up into the star category this year, and it's the guy who had probably one of the hottest second halves of the NFL, like hottest last couple weeks of the season I've seen in a while, and that's Jonathan Taylor. Um, this is a guy who has the it factor. Again, he's pretty small. He's not really like Alvin Kamara. Like I don't think he's not an effective pass catching back. But I think like if you just look at his highlights from last year, last couple weeks of the season, there were a lot of teams where he basically just torched them. Like he had a really impressive second half. I really like again Naheem Hines won't be that guy, but I really think there's a real chance that Jonathan Taylor can really develop into like a really effective. like running back. Will he be a superstar? I mean, we'll see.
Could.
I definitely think the potential's there, but I guess for me, I'm also projecting out that Jonathan Taylor is going to take a big jump because I could definitely see it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I see where you're coming from there. It's just if the running back takes a jump, that doesn't move him from 11 to 4 in my
Okay,
eyes.
that's fair. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Yeah. That's all I'm going to say about
Okay.
that. We can quickly talk about the Packers because we had a pretty decent difference on those. I'm
Yeah.
not a huge Packers fan. I'm
Mhm.
really not. It's just I look at the roster. I looked at the roster last year, very much the same roster. They didn't do a whole lot in the offseason except lose Corey Linsley and keep Aaron Jones, which I've spoken my piece on that. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say any more about that. I think it's
Kept
really
King as
stupid.
well.
Yeah. I just think that I think with Aaron Rodgers on the roster, Devontae Adams on the roster, Jair Alexander, Kenny Clark, you get the idea. Aaron Jones, if they're on the roster, the team is going to play really well. And
Hmm.
I don't want them to keep playing well because everyone gets really high on the Packers, and no one saw their loss to the Bucks in the conference finals coming.
Yeah.
Somehow nobody saw it coming. I
Yeah.
saw it coming. I want to bet on that. It's just
Yeah.
I just I've given up hating on them blindly. That's
Yeah.
my thing. And
Yeah.
I have to be realistic that those players are going to get it done.
Okay. This was probably one of the most difficult projections I had to do because I have absolutely no idea how this Packers team is going to play out. And the reason I say that is Mr. Green Bay, Mr. Aaron Rodgers, we have no idea if he's going to play for the Packers this year. We really don't.
Yeah.
Um, will he? I mean, I would say probably. He's obviously threatening to sit out the year. He wants to be traded unless they fire their GM and or the CEO or whatever. He basically wants he feels underappreciated. Fine. Do I think he should feel that way? I mean maybe, but the way I look at it is this. I think the next couple weeks leading up to the season are going to be a very ugly and uncomfortable situation for a lot of Green Bay Packers fans because I do ultimately think that Aaron Rodgers will either threaten to um, sit out or basically just kind of demand that they trade him. Um, and I think it's just difficult because if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, they're in trouble. Because as you mentioned, they obviously have Vontae Adams, they have Aaron Jones, but if you don't have Aaron Rodgers to actually use those pieces, they don't have a defense to help bail them out there. Like Aaron Rodgers literally holds the status of the franchise in his hand. Like if he's gone, like they're rebuilding. I don't think there's anything else that you can really say about that team. They don't have a defense. They have two great play. They have two superstar talents in Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, and sorry at this current moment in time Aaron Rodgers. But I just think it's a very difficult situation to project. But if they do have them, even if they do have them, they have a great offense. But that defense is absolutely atrocious. And you look at what happened last year in the NFC Championship game. They got exposed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you can't even say that they got much better because they actually lost a couple pieces that were actually really important. But anyways, they definitely have the star power, but that's really all they have at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And I see you making that point, but you know, in past years, that my thinking is just in past years they haven't had a deep roster and they've still gone far. So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
like I said, I'm just being realistic on them based on what they've done in the past few years with Matt
I hope
LaFleur as the
I hope they prove me wrong. I like Vontae Adams and Aaron Jones. I like Aaron Rodgers. I like a lot of pieces on this team, but I guess the way it ended last year, I just don't really see a lot that makes me think, oh, they're actually going to be better than they were last year. I guess that's the other part of it, but I think the division will be fun to watch at least. Hopefully, the other teams in the division can make it a bit interesting with like the Bears and the Vikings, but I'm not confident that's going to happen, especially with the Detroit Lions being in that division. But yeah,
I mean,
anyways,
they went 13-3 last year. Ranking them seventh isn't projecting them to be better than last year. It's projecting them to be worse, like
that's
maybe
fair.
one game worse. I don't
Right.
think they're going to be as good as they were last year. I just again realistic.
Yeah.
Anyways, uh, one last thing before we go because we've been talking about this a while. And how how dare you rank the Browns over the Ravens? How
I knew you
dare
were
you?
gonna bring that up. I knew you were gonna bring that
I've
up.
been sitting on that all episode.
You were
I've
gonna
just been
bring that
sitting on that.
up.
Like when do I expose this guy?
Yeah.
Come on now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. To be fair, okay. To be fair, it was one spot. That's the first thing. The second thing is, dude, you can't look at how the Browns offense, sorry, not the offense. The offseason the Browns have had has been absolutely phenomenal. They've addressed every single hole or concern that most people have on that roster, with the exception of maybe quarterback. And I don't even think after last year that quarterback's really a concern anymore. I just look at the Ravens and like obviously Sammy Watkins is a great pickup. They needed to address their receiver help. I think it seeing what the Titans gave up for Julio Jones. I think it's real. To be honest, I think it's quite embarrassing that the Ravens didn't give up that much for Julio Jones, considering that they're supposed to be in win now mode. They need help on the receiver core. I just look at the Browns. I think this is probably one of the most complete and well constructed teams in the AFC. I never thought I would say that about the Cleveland Browns. I just think they look absolutely phenomenal. Their defense looks like it's ready to go to war. Their offense looks great, and they're getting OBJ back. It just I am really excited and surprised I guess I'm surprised to see how well the Browns have done. I'm very excited to see what they do this offseason. But that being said, I think the Browns and the Ravens are actually going to be quite close when it comes to I think it's going to be a battle between the Ravens and the Browns for the division, but ultimately I do think the Browns are probably going to take the division.
Yeah, I think we're projecting some pretty interesting battles at the top of divisions here. Like we're projecting the Buccaneers and the Saints, the
Yep.
Browns and the Ravens, the Titans and
Niners
the
and the Rams.
Colts, Niners and the Rams. I was actually going to get to that right next. It's going to be really interesting to see those battles.
I'll say this: if they added like one or two more like competent receivers to that receiver core, I probably would have put them over the Browns. That defense is still solid in Baltimore. They obviously lost Matthew Judon. Who was a big loss, but like I just I the defense is still ridiculous, and they still have some pieces on offense. That run offense is going to be interesting now that once they bought out Mark Ingram, but they still have Lamar. But I think they are still like maybe one or two more pieces of being like actual like legitimate Super Bowl contenders.
Okay. See, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to counter by saying that and this you can call this a hot take. I don't think it's a hot take. The Ravens receiving core is better than the Browns receiving core.
Okay,
I
interesting.
don't think that's a hot take.
Mhm.
The Browns have no depth. Because behind Jarvis Landry, there's no depth. And Jarvis Landry's kind of old. You
Mhm.
have OBJ who hasn't played in 2 years.
Mhm.
And Rashard Higgins. That's all you've got. Your tight ends are Austin Hooper and David Njoku
It's also
compared to
right.
David to Mark Andrews.
Right.
J.K. Dobbins can catch passes. I mean, so can Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. But if we're
Yeah.
talking just the receiving core of the receivers,
Right.
you have Josh Bateman, you have Sammy Watkins, Devin Duvernay in the slot, Marquise
Mhm.
Brown as your speed, over the top threat. Like Miles Boykins, your big body, just jump up and catch the ball. I think the Ravens have. I think their receiving core is deep and it doesn't get enough credit. It's really good.
Yeah.
And the
That's fair.
defense, yeah, they lost some pieces on the defense, but you have one of the best defensive coordinators and defensive head coaches in the league on your team.
Mhm.
They get the benefit of the doubt 10 times out of
Right.
10. Whereas
Yeah.
with the Browns, they had one good year, and even then, their defense wasn't amazing last year.
Mhm.
They kind of coasted on the talent. Yeah, they fixed their holes. Their secondary looks phenomenal. Bring in
Mhm.
Greg Newsome, bring in John Johnson, bring in Troy Hill. It looks phenomenal.
Didn't they get JOK as well?
Yeah, but actually, yeah, he could very well play at safety.
Right.
They could play him at safety. They could play him at linebacker. He doesn't. He makes their run defense not awful, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Like their run
Yeah.
defense would be horrible without him. I
Right.
just think the Ravens. I think the Ravens have less holes.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to Lamar Jackson, but I think they have less holes.
I guess the other thing for me about the Browns, like this is also a projection. I'm just really hoping finally after like 3 years in Cleveland, Kevin Stefanski can finally find a proper way to utilize OBJ, assuming he stays healthy. Like the years before, like they've obviously had him in the mix, but he's never really been like the OBJ of the New York Giants, where he's like absolutely phenomenal, like highlight reel. And that was with that was with Eli Manning. Like Baker Mayfield is surely better than like the last 3 years of Eli Manning's career. Like, and I think if they can find a way to utilize him, it's a complete game changer. Because you're right, outside of Jarvis Landry, there isn't a lot of receiving talent there. But I guess the other thing is you don't really need a lot of receiving talent there, considering how they have both I think Kareem Hunt's still on the Browns, isn't he?
Yeah.
And yeah, they have Kareem Hunt and they have Nick Chubb, so you don't really need a whole lot from your receivers there. But like when you have OBJ and Jarvis Landry in complementing your running game like that, I guess I like that. I like that maybe a bit more than what the Ravens have. That's all I'm saying. I don't disagree with anything you're saying in the sense that the Ravens receiving core is maybe a bit overlooked. I 100% agree with you. I guess the one thing that when I look at the Ravens, they don't really have like a legitimate deep threat. And I guess you can call Marquise Brown. I guess you can consider him that. I wouldn't really consider him to be that elite deep threat, which is why I think they would have really benefited from having Julio Jones. But again, it's Julio. Like, there's not real. There's only one in like. There's only like 3 or 4 of them in the entire league. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I do think the Ravens will be fine, but I also think the Browns might be a little bit better off. That's all.
Okay, that's fair. We can agree to disagree on that one.
Yes,
Uh,
we can, which it doesn't
mhm.
really happen that often, but
Yeah,
anyways,
no, that's absolutely right. So, yeah. Anyways, that's it. I think
yeah.
next what we're going to do is we're going to take this same list and we're going to talk about some of the potentially overrated and underrated teams in the league.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, I think we got a good setup for the next little while. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Yep, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you.